Hello and welcome to the Progressive Hub Show. My name is Ryan Black, managing editor at progressivehub.net and organizing coordinator at rootsaction.org. With me today is Sam Rosenthal, political director at rootsaction.org, and Ricci Sergienko, organizer in Los Angeles. How you guys doing today?
What up?
What up?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
So first thing we want to talk about today, Joe Biden still running for re-election, sadly, and the debt ceiling deal that has apparently just been made. I guess to start, can we explain what the debt ceiling even is?
Sure. So the debt ceiling is basically sets a cap on the amount of borrowing that the U.S. government's allowed to do. So it's not actually like a way to create new spending. It's just a way to finance existing spending that Congress has already decided or committed to making. So the exercise of it used to be that this was like a kind of non-partisan, non-political issue where you just would run up against like this borrowing limit and you had to extend your borrowing ability to meet your obligations. But recently, over the last 15-ish years, it's become grounds for high stakes political combat where the Democrats and Republicans basically fight about what their priorities are going to be and kind of foreshadow what spending they think is okay and what spending they don't think is okay.
Right. And it sounds like the GOP made out like bandits in the negotiations. I haven't really read anything that the Democrats got out of it. But meanwhile, it seems like the GOP was able to get work requirements shoved in and cutting the IRS funding. And it seems like Joe Manchin just got a pipeline out of it, as far as I can tell. He seems to be the only one pushing for this pipeline. And suddenly there it is in the deal. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the political calculus for, Joe Biden was that he thought it would be bad for there to be a debt ceiling crisis under his administration. So for them, they're kind of broadcasting this as just being able to find a deal at all and raise the debt limit is a win for them, and I think I disagree that is a political win. That just seems to me like sort of bad, playing the political game poorly. There should have been some attempt to hang this around Republicans, be like, hey, they're trying to hold the country hostage. And there really wasn't that much of that. And instead, you just see, again, Joe Biden is much more comfortable being kind of a Senate type creature, transactional, making backroom deals. And that's really how he understands politics in the country. He doesn't really think about the, implementation of policy down the line. I think he's seeing it much more through the lens of how does DC do business, basically. So right. Yeah, not a good win for the Democrats, regardless of what they're going to say on TV in the next few days. And really, the Democratic Party really snubbing some of the core constituencies that helped Biden win the presidency in 2020, especially working people, people of color, young people who have student loans, and environmental activists. So I think it's a really pretty disgraceful deal overall.
Right. It seems like Biden is way more interested in getting a deal done and being complete with something and saying, oh, I did this, rather than any of the policy within it, regardless of what it actually does. He's more happy to just say, well, I got that done, and then let the Democratic Party spin it to their advantage in whatever way they can. But it's going to be hard to this time because I'm not really seeing, what did the Dems get out of this? I can't, they screwed over more of their voters. I'm just not sure what the win is. How do you spin this to the activists?
I'm not sure, but Joe Manchin did get a pipeline. Also, I saw this morning that Chuck Schumer's second largest political donor is the company behind the Mountain Valley Pipeline, the one that randomly popped up in this deal. And so, the win for the Democrats is that their donors and their backers win. And so when you exist to uphold corporate America and, people in the pipeline business, that's a win.
Yeah, and I think like the Democrats are going to sell this publicly as, you know, we kept the lights on, we were the responsible party, you know, we're the adults in the room, which we hear a lot from them. But that, yeah, what Richie's saying is like, you know, that's the win for that they take back to the donors, and they say like, hey, you know, we juice the economy a little bit more for you guys, aren't you like pleased with how this turned out? Um, and meanwhile, it's just going to screw those groups I was just talking about. It's really, there's nothing for what, you know, is like purported to be the kind of core Democratic Party constituency here, which again is like working people, people of color, young people. There's just nothing in this bill that's going to benefit those folks. And in fact, there's a lot in this bill that's going to be really harmful. New SNAP work requirements, new TANF work requirements. That's just pure punitive, let's punish the poor type policy. I mean, there's no real rationale for why that would be good policy making at all. The Mountain Valley Pipeline, obviously, just completely pork for Joe Manchin, who, I mean, you know, we can dwell on that for a second because, like, this is a guy, like, Joe Manchin's a guy who's supposed to be a moderate. He's supposed to be a voice of reason. So how is it that he made out best in this deal of any group of actors? You know, this is a guy who like hit a home run basically. And meanwhile, we're supposed to think of this person as someone who's a reasonable, responsible legislator, you know, who really just has the best interests of the country, of moderation in mind when he's legislating. And meanwhile, he just got this huge win for his donors and, you know, for the wealthy people in West Virginia. I mean, it's not going to help working people in West Virginia, but like that was sort of the top line environmental policy from this, and it's just really disgraceful, I think.
Yeah, and what was the news in the weeks leading up to this was that Joe Manchin is kind of subtly threatening to run for president himself. He mentioned that there's this grassroots momentum for him, which there absolutely isn't. There's corporate funded backers who want him to do this, probably to create this exact situation where he suddenly has leverage on the president to demand something in the debt ceiling negotiations, which is exactly what he did. And he got what he wants. And we'll see over the next couple of weeks if he's serious, if he's still pretending to be serious about running for president, or if that was all just a ploy to get exactly what he got. And then you have to think, you know, this is on top of this Mountain Valley Pipeline permit is on top of the North Slope, Alaska oil drilling, the Willow Pipeline deal that he just made, which is on top of opening up the Gulf to drilling. So what is the strategy there? If we were talking about this a little bit ago, Sam, if your environmental activists were your strongest activists during the Trump years, and if they were the ones who were and still are bringing the most energy to electoral and non-electoral organizing, what are you doing by continuously disrespecting them and going against what you say, going against your promises you've made to them? I just don't see, beyond the immediate short-term benefit of Biden being able to say, oh, I got a deal done, I just don't see any benefit to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a pattern that's like we can see with the Democratic Party going back to 2016 and much farther back than that. But, you know, for the purposes of like the current era, going back to, you know, Trump's first election, where they're essentially saying to like people who are most animated and engaged around trying to shape policy, leftist activists, organized labor, people in environmental groups, people in racial justice groups, like, you have to vote for us at the end of the day because the other party are literal fascists, which is true, like they are. But, you know, that's really cold comfort for us, I think. And I think we're going to see diminishing returns to that strategy. And we saw it a little bit in 2020. I think in 2024, that strategy is headed straight for disaster. Like, it's not that, you know, people under 40 or people of color or people who are really active in their unions are like not going to, you know, are going to become Republican Party members, are going to vote for Trump or DeSantis or something. But I think the danger is more that people are just not going to vote. Like, it's just going to be two shitty choices. They'll feel like, okay, well, maybe like this isn't that important to me. Nothing really changed last time I turned out, you know, whether they just like came out to vote in 2020 or if they were active in whipping votes, trying to get Biden into the White House in 2020. Like, there's just been no payoff for that. And, you know, we saw a lot of energy around the environmental movement during the last presidential election. Biden made all these promises, say he's completely broken, not just promises where he's sort of like they fall into the bottom of the agenda. He's actively broken them. And, he said no new drilling on federal lands during his campaign. He's completely gone against that. Mountain Valley Pipeline is just another, totally turning his back on the environmental movement. So I think the concern here is just like folks aren't going to turn out in 2024. They're not going to be animated around the idea that another Biden term is going to produce, the policy they want to see, because why would they? Like, what evidence is there that that's been an effective way of shaping policy in this country? So people will probably continue doing the work they're doing, like, with their activist group, with local activism, but I don't think they're going to engage that much with the presidential process. And that's a really catastrophic horizon, I think.
Yeah, I just want to say the Democratic Party can fuck off. What's happening in Florida is happening under a Biden presidency. They're trying to build a $90 million cop training facility in Atlanta with a Democratic mayor, with 2 Democratic senators who haven't said anything about that under a Biden presidency. And so, they trying to scare us into, we need Democrats to protect us from fascism. It's already here. Like, we're already fighting it. And there are people already fighting it, and the Democrats don't have a plan, and they're not going to save us from fascism. And so, Ryan, you can edit it out, but fuck the Democratic Party.
No, we'll leave it in, and I think we'll show what you're referring to here. Is you have police raiding the homes of anti-Cop City organizers in Atlanta, part of a brutal crackdown on dissent against the police training facility. The SWAT raid and charges against the protest fund are unprecedented. So what it sounds like is essentially just because activists are getting together, putting money together to help these protesters get out of jail, a bail fund, which is one of the most basic organizing concepts that people take part in at the local level, they're making it illegal. And then they're also charging some of these people with terrorism charges. And that is in a city with a Democratic mayor, like you said.
Yeah. And so, the whole thing about the Democratic Party, like, protecting us from fascism is so ridiculous because I don't know if you all remember, but people were trying to sound the alarms in 2020 when, Biden was putting changes into the definitions of domestic violent extremists, and he put anti-fascists into that group. He put climate activists into that group. And that set the stage for what's happening in Atlanta right now. They are trying to label climate protesters and police abolitionists as domestic violent extremists, quote unquote, domestic terrorists. And that should be extremely alarming for everyone around the country. And this is happening under a Biden presidency. This is Biden actually enforcing these things and having these policies put out, and happening under a Democratic mayor. And there are 40 plus people have been arrested and charged with domestic terrorism. They shot and killed Tortuguita, who was a climate protester who was sitting in his tent in the forest, and the cops raided their area, and shot and killed them while they had their hands up. And then yesterday, they arrested people with the Atlanta Solidarity bail fund, and they're threatening RICO charges against a bail fund. And this is actually fucking fascism. And so I don't buy any scare tactics from the Democrats about protecting us from fascism and scaring us about Trump and DeSantis. This shit is happening right now under Joe Biden. And like Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff are fucking quiet about what's happening. Like, this kid got murdered in the forest so they could build a $90 million police training facility. And that should shake all of us to our core. And so, yeah, when we talk about electoral politics and all of these things, the Democratic Party, they're doing it to themselves, and they would rather toe the line. Joe Biden said that there needs to be 100,000 more cops on our streets. We have Democratic mayors like Eric Adams, Karen Bass, Andre Dickens, Jacob Frey. They all go for more police funding in their cities. And so, what makes them different from right-wing, conservative, reactionary mayors? And it's all quote unquote blue and liberal and progressive. It's bullshit. And so, when Democrats fucking lose elections, it's on them.
Right. They're just never going to accept any blame on themselves. It's so unfortunate. After the police killed Tortuega, it's interesting to see that the response of the city is, and I guess the federal government as well, is to go after the protesters and make it more difficult, to try to discourage protesting. Cops murder somebody, and instead of holding the cops accountable, instead of doing anything there, they're going to say, okay, well, the best way to prevent this from happening again is to make sure people aren't out protesting, exercising their First Amendment rights. So that seems to line up with what we can expect from Democratic mayors, I guess.
And don't forget the...
Go ahead, Ricci.
I was just going to say that the cops fucking friendly fired themselves in the forest that morning that they shot Tortuguita. And they attempted to blame the shooting on Tortuguita and said that they had a gun, and that the cops' story was not fucking true from the very beginning. But the media and the politicians ran with that story, but it was all set up, and they got caught. And they got caught by people paying attention. And so the Democratic Party and Andre Dickens, and they can keep trying to do the spin cycle, but they keep getting exposed. And so, like you said, Ryan, they'll just do anything to protect themselves, but that's fine. They can continue to do that, and there will be a movement growing outside the Democratic Party that will be there for the people in the future.
Quickly, I wanted to share on progressivehub.net on this story, which I think is still on the front page, and with every other story, you can take action right then and there, read the story, get mad, and do something about it. On our stories about Cop City in Atlanta, you can write to the Atlanta mayor and city council and demand that they stop Cop City now. So we urge everyone to do that. It's the littlest, easiest thing you can do to help these people out. What's interesting about this story here, about what's happening in Atlanta and about the debt ceiling, what links them so closely is that it's the Democratic Party really not doing anything to stand up for working people, for minorities, for poor people, for people who need help. And that seems to be a pattern that's not going anywhere, which brings us back to a point Sam made in the previous conversation. They're just hoping we vote for them because the other side is so much worse. And luckily for them, the other side is really, really, really bad. But in 2024, I don't know if the Democrats have anything to offer. I mean, there's just no energy. The organizing base isn't going to want to do anything. The environmentalists, where the most energy is, isn't going to want to do anything. Anti-war folks, I mean, why would you support the Democratic Party right now? They want war everywhere. I'm just not sure what the tactics are to actually get the votes to win if Biden is truly seriously going to try to run for another 4 years.
Yeah. I want to point out another area of connective tissue between Cop City and police departments in general and what just happened with the debt ceiling deal. Because you'll see that there's in the debt ceiling deal, they partitioned the amounts that they had allocated for non-defense spending and defense spending. So it's two big blocks basically, which is ridiculous if you think about it, because it's it sets up this binary where we do non-defense spending, which is basically everything we need to live, and then we do defense spending, which is fighter jets that don't work and things like that. And the cap on non-defense spending like lowers the amount that we can spend effectively on non-defense policy, and on defense spending, it's billed as a cap, but it actually raises the amount. So it's beyond this like gigantic military budget. It raises the amount of defense spending we can do. And I think that's important for like police departments, because a lot of this stuff where, Ricci was just talking about the way that activists have been recategorized as terrorists. A lot of this stuff is like the legacy of the war on terror and the way that we militarized police departments during the war on terror. And in fact, like in some ways, very literally, police departments were like buying the runoff from U.S. military weaponry and material that they couldn't use in the field for whatever reason, or, had excess production of. So we had this, and the rationale then was like, well, there are terrorists everywhere living in our country, and we need to, find them and root them out. And people were so scared, they were like, sure. But, there were activists at the time, people like Norman Solomon, who were saying, this is a really bad idea. We're giving away our civil liberties. Police departments were bad already. Like, I don't want to make it seem like it was great with the police before this, but what's changed is that police departments received material from the military. They received training from the military. So now there's this hyper militarized style of policing that I think really is like part of the legacy of the war on terror. And so when we boost the defense budget at the national level, yeah, it means like more aircraft carriers, more missiles, more bombs, but also it means more of that runoff that keeps going to police departments and keeps like these extremely over-resourced SWAT teams and police special units able to function at this level that's really like military searching for a target. And I think that's why you see this overwhelming show of force all the time in cities. I mean, it's like, these are issues where you really don't need like a SWAT team in body armor to resolve a dispute with activists. I mean, we know we're all, we're in favor of nonviolent settlements of these disputes, but you basically have a small military roving around the city looking for military type conflicts that it can get engaged in. And I think that's one of the problems here too, is that police departments are so over-resourced, over-armored, over-gunned, and they're going to find these situations where they're going to tell the public, we're in a battle with these activists. This is life or death. There's a war on our streets, all this stuff we hear, because otherwise there's no justification for the way these departments are outfitted. So they're going to have to keep finding terrorist type targets to justify the way that they're outfitted.
And the IDF will be training at Cop City. Like the Israeli police and American police forces, they have, but they have there's a theory, I'll find it in a second, about the cross fucking pollination between Israeli defense and American police forces. Like LAPD and Atlanta PD go to Israel to train with them, and it's been stated already that Cop City will be used as like a mutual training ground. So when you talk about militarism and policing, Cop City has it all.
Right. Well, I think a big similarity there between the IDF and the U.S. police is they both have large populations of civilians that they can test weaponry on that don't get the time of day in the news media, whether it's
also like
poor communities or it's Palestine, it's the West Bank. So
yeah.
Go ahead, Sam.
It's also just worth remembering Cop City is like, it's a tourist vehicle. It's a vehicle for like tourism dollars as well. And so like when you think about the way that cities are funded and the way cities think about funding themselves, and again, to Richie's earlier point, these are mostly like blue cities with Democratic mayors. We have to like keep in mind that this is what passes as like a viable economic strategy for a large American city in the 21st century is like, we're going to build a police training complex. It's the biggest one, the most deluxe one in the country, maybe in the world. And we're going to get, people coming from other cities, people coming from Israel, coming from countries all over the world, so they can train here and the tourist dollars will flow in, after they spend their day at the shooting range or whatever, they're going to hit the Atlanta restaurants and nightlife and whatever else it is. So it's really like, it's worth considering, what the economic priorities of cities are too, because this seems like such a dystopian perversion of like, how do you get folks to come to enjoy the sights and sounds of Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, during the George Floyd protests where I live in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is not a big place. I was living downtown at the time where the protests were, and it was shocking that out of nowhere, Fort Wayne SWAT comes out with what was essentially a tank, like these giant armored vehicles with all this gear on, and they're just leaning out the doors, screaming at people. I mean, they were chomping at the bit to hurt people. They were so excited that they finally got to use all their military toys that they've probably been sitting on and waiting to use and waiting to use. Finally, we had a protest in Fort Wayne. This is not a big place. I think somebody stood on one car, and then it was like, that's a wrap from there. Guy got his eye shot out by a rubber bullet. Like the cops were brutal here during that, and they were so pumped to use all the military weapons. And I'm sure the cops from here will be going down to Atlanta to train at cops. I'm sure cops from all over the country and the world will be going down there to train. And unfortunately, if you've seen the types of training that cops get, like, have you guys ever seen the private seminar type trainings that they get? They're wild. They're super racist. They're super just like, your number one job as a cop is to get home to your family. It's like they teach them to shoot people. They teach them to kill people. They teach them the rules and how the law has their back. Don't give a statement right away. Wait your full 72 hours. Talk to your superiors. Get your story straight. And they really line them up to prevent them from ever getting in trouble while using all these army weapons that they've dreamed of using since they were little kids, probably. Going from Atlanta to Los Angeles, where you organize, Ricci, I've seen this story several places. Gang members hold positions at the highest level of LA Sheriff Department, investigation reveals. Now, since then, Alex Villanueva, the former sheriff, has been ousted, it sounds like, and there is a new sheriff in LA. Have things gotten better? Are the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department gangs gone now? Did we win?
No, absolutely not. No. So Robert Luna won. I think, it was important for us to go after Alex Villanueva the way that we did because he was so outlandish and violent, and he was in place to protect the deputy gangs. Like there is they used to just take duffel bags of cash over to his house, and like the deputy gangs, like he was in there to protect them. He ran as a progressive in 2018 and won, and it was a total, like, he used the Democratic Party to get in, and then he was just basically there to attack the families and protect deputy gangs. But then Robert Luna won in the last election, and he's basically just going to try to be a polished face and voice in front of a department that still has deputy gangs operating within it. His number two is a woman named April Tardy, and she is an admitted tattooed deputy gang member. She's the second in line in the sheriff's department. So he's not rooting out deputy gangs. Like, his number two is a gang member. And there's also these new there's a lawsuit that's happening right now between two rival deputy gangs in Compton, where, the head of the station in Compton was a member of what is now, we know, a newly revealed gang called the Gladiators. He filed a lawsuit against fellow deputies in the Compton station, basically because there was a deputy gang turf war happening. And so Deputy Larry Waldy, he sued, and they're in court right now. And so there's two gangs in the Compton station. It's the Gladiators and the Executioners. And so basically there's a lawsuit going on right now where in Los Angeles, because there was a power struggle between the deputy gangs in the Compton station, and then also,
what are they being sued for? What are they suing them for?
So Larry Waldy was the one actually that had the rank to be in charge in the Compton station, and he was upset that members of the Executioners Deputy Gang, which is led by Jaime Juarez, admitted. Excuse me, he's not admitted, but he has the Executioner's tattoo. We know that. Juarez ordered a work stoppage with the executioners in Compton, and but he was lower ranking than Waldy, and so there's like a power struggle between the deputy gangs, where one deputy gang is a higher ranking official, but the executioners. This is so fucked up, like that I'm having some like political analysis and breaking down that there are two killer deputy gangs in a sheriff's department in Compton. The only way to get into one of these gangs is to murder someone or to help cover up a murder. And so like it's like, yeah, I'm breaking it down like what is happening, but it's like it's so fucked that this is happening. And again, the sheriff's department got an increase to their budget. They get a $3.9 billion budget from the county. They run the jails, and basically they have an extortion racket over the county of Los Angeles, and no elected official is ever going to do anything because they're Democrats and they're cowards. And so, yeah, it's like the people of Los Angeles, have been doing this for a long time, having to, fight for themselves against the sheriff's department.
Does it seem like the new mayor, Karen Bass, is taking a new stance, or is she trying to leverage anything to help this situation, or what? How is she engaged in this?
So this is a great public education lesson, because people probably don't realize that there's the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles. Karen Bass is the mayor of the city of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles is 4 million people. The county of Los Angeles is 10 million. The sheriff's department is the county law enforcement agency, and LAPD is the city law enforcement agency. So Karen Bass doesn't have any control over LASD. She does have control over LAPD. And just like every police department around the country and in Los Angeles, Karen Bass raised the LAPD budget this year again. So there are like $3.2 billion. She has vehemently supported the LAPD in basically every fucking public situation since she's been elected. And as we said earlier, just like Democratic mayors around the country, Eric Adams, Andre Dickens, Karen Bass, Jacob Frey, they're just spineless against the police. They suck.
What about Newsom? Could Gavin Newsom do anything? Like, where is there anybody who has any control or leverage over the county sheriffs?
The attorney general is supposed to, and Javier Becerra, that's not how you pronounce his first name, but Becerra, he was a former attorney. The former attorney general opened a special investigation from the AG's office into LASD gangs a few years ago, and then Attorney General Rob Bonta took over. Rob Bonta is a fucking suit too, who is like he doesn't have an update on the LASD gangs investigation. Who knows what's going on in the Attorney General's office in regards to that? He's like, these Democratic officials in California, like Newsom, sellout. Rob Bonta is a suit and a sellout. Like, they don't do fucking anything.
Right. And, I have to note that Kamala Harris's former job, Attorney General in California. So I'm assuming she didn't do anything to stop or fight back against the gangs.
No. The only thing that has been successful is people speaking out in Los Angeles against the sheriff's department. The coalition that I'm a part of, the Check the Sheriff Coalition, which is led by impacted families and people that have lost loved ones to LASD violence. There are families that have been speaking out for decades. This coalition has continued to grow, and like 4 or 5 years ago, they weren't even calling them deputy gangs; they were calling them cliques or subgroups. And so, due to the work of the people, trying to change the public narrative, they're calling them gangs now. So yeah, the only change that we've seen has come from organizing and people power, and it's led by impacted families. And so as an abolitionist, I'll end it with this, but like as an abolitionist, what does abolition actually look like? And who can we depend on fulfilling what abolition looks like? And we are trying to get rid of the police, but we can't rely on elected officials to do it. So how do we pressure defunding or removing police officers as much as we can, as quickly as possible, and exposing them as fucking violent gang members is going to be one of the first steps, and it's going to be the work that people in Los Angeles do. So we'll see what the future holds for that, but a lot has changed. They still have crazy control over the county. They'll get increases, but Alex Villanueva got his fucking ass kicked, and Google LASD gangs is very popular. The writer Cerise Castle has done extensive research on it. Kate Cagle, LA Times actually has they had a good previous writer too, but they have a good new writer, Carrie Blakinger. So there's a lot of attention on this.
All right. Sounds good. I guess very, very last thing is, Sam, you just wrote an email for Roots Action, I think went out today. You want to talk a little bit about Step Aside Joe at all?
Yeah, so Step Aside Joe is just basically a continuation of a campaign that we started last year called Don't Run Joe. I shouldn't say it's a continuation. It's a new campaign. But last year we were asking Joe Biden not to run for president again. And now we're asking Joe Biden to reconsider his decision to run for president again. And that's just, our critique is kind of the same as it was last year, which is to say, like, we think that he is a uniquely weak incumbent. For all the reasons we were discussing earlier. He hasn't passed good policy for working Americans. He's done nothing to shore up his standing with the constituencies that help him get elected in the first place. And, in 2020, Biden was able to win because that was a referendum on Trump. People were tired of Trump being in office. Presidential elections are always referenda on the person who's in office at that moment. And people wanted Trump out of office. But now in 2024, it's going to be all about Joe Biden. What kind of job has he been doing? And when you look at polling, it's really, really bad for him. His approval rating is really low. He's now in a group of presidents, in terms of his approval rating, who have all been one-term presidents. So it's like, George H.W. Bush, Jimmy Carter. It's a group you don't want to be in, and that's where he is. And people don't approve of his handling of the economy. People don't approve of the way he's dealt with the negotiations recently. His, when they ask people, like, do you trust the president to steer the country in the right direction? More people than not say that they don't trust the president. They're all really bad indicators, and it's all headed for Joe Biden could lose. And his matchups, polling matchups versus Trump, versus DeSantis even have him underwater. And, DeSantis is not, like, right now does not appear to be a very strong candidate at all. He's caught up in weirdo disputes with Disney World, which is probably just going to seem really, like, bizarre on the national stage when he starts running on that. But Biden still is not polling favorably against him in a number of polls. So we're really worried. This isn't like a campaign about beating up on Joe Biden. It's a campaign about saying, like, hey, it looks really, really bad. If you step aside now, there can be a normal Democratic Party primary process. We might actually get someone good in there who, is committed to like a progressive vision for the future, who can actually speak to some of the constituencies that like powered you to a win in 2020. But you have to step aside because otherwise it's just going to be the media coverage will be all about Joe Biden. The media coverage will be all about the Republican primary. And, we're really worried about what's going to happen in 2024. So that's the campaign. If you want to, learn more about it, you can go to our website. You can sign our petition. It's at stepasidejoe.org. And you can read more about why we have this campaign going on.
Yeah, and it seems like, to me at least, it seems like this is the perfect campaign to actually unite the Democratic Party. Oddly enough, you have the moderate Democrats who really only care about winning. They don't really care about policy. They just want to win. Meanwhile, Joe Biden has terrible polling. He's going to lose to Donald Trump, most likely, if polling stays the same. He's been underwater for a long time. After the supposed big Democratic victories in the midterm, his polling didn't go up. So you have that going on. You have that he's just a bad candidate and he's going to lose, combined with his terrible policies, and he's not progressive and he's not pushing anything. So the left doesn't want him to run. Moderates should not want him to run because he cannot beat Donald Trump again. And to me, it just seems like, hey, well, this should be easy, minus the power structures in DC, including MSNBC and Democratic supporting media that keep telling us that Joe Biden is the only candidate who can beat Donald Trump because he's the only one who's already done it. Not that other Democrats couldn't. They don't mention that, could have as well, but they don't mention that. So it just seems like if we could get anyone on board with us, it seems so obvious. And it's just still so shocking to me that this late in the process, a month and a half, 2 months after Biden's already announced, you still just don't have very much energy telling him that it's a bad idea when all the polls say it's a bad idea. And I don't know what's going to change to change that.
Yeah. And that argument is really weak. I think like the past is not the present. Just because someone did something in the past doesn't mean they're going to do it again in the future. We're all NBA fans here on the call. Like, the Boston Celtics this year weren't the Boston Celtics from last year. Like it was a different outcome. Sorry, Ricci, but it's true. And like, that's true with all human endeavors. Like you can't just say past performance is an indicator of future success. And like, that's it, especially when we're talking about, a really, again, existential election, which they all are, because, the Republican Party is like purely turned over to fascism at this point, is enthralled to this group of completely insane people. And, unfortunately, we have to like keep our finger in the dam right now and keep those people from getting into office. But we need better candidates to be sure we're going to win those elections.
Yeah. Last question, NBA finals, because you brought it up, Sam. Who you got and in how many games? Stuff.
I want to say Miami, but I think it's going to be Denver. I think it's going to be like Denver in 5, probably.
I think that's probably right, but I'm going to say Heat in 7. Let's go.
Nice.
Who you got, Ricci?
Probably Nuggets in 4.
Yeah.
Jokic is a fucking beast. He's gonna
he's unstoppable.
Yeah, he's the best player in the NBA right now.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable to watch him play. Okay, all right. Thank you guys. We will talk again next week, and I'll see you later.